Alright, we're back with more college football coverage, and in this video, I'll be covering CFP action, as well as a different bowl game that I've watched before everything took place. But obviously, the college football playoff is a priority. So, to get straight into it, and to start off with number 9 Alabama at number 8 Oklahoma in Norman. And I did a lot of the stage setting in terms of the context of the game in an earlier video. But essentially, it all came down to this. For the third time in the last 13 months, these two would be facing off against each other. And interestingly enough, before they showed a graphic about it, it said that Alabama had not lost to an opponent twice in the same season since 1893. So coming into that, I don't even think any single person outside of the stats room understood just how major that could be. But regardless, you don't want to drop to a team twice in one season regardless. So we're talking about over 122 years of that shit not happening. Alabama did not want to be on the wrong side of history there. Let's just make that very clear. Now, I will give context as for most of the CFP games did not have the means to watch them completely live. I had to track them all through play-by-play for the most part, and ended up watching some material and post via highlights. But that didn't take away from the flow of me being able to track the game and get at least a sense of what was going on in real time. And it's safe to say that for Oklahoma in this situation, if you've been paying attention to these games that they've played against the Crimson Tide over the past year and change, it actually went about how you would expect it to. They did not end up on their first drive doing much of anything, even though things could have become a problem when they instantly started letting John Mateer get out in space. That's been the game plan for pretty much every team that they've had to deal with. Once you allow that to happen, you've automatically lost the battle on the trenches. And any number of things can happen from there. Nonetheless, Alabama would manage to get a stop on this first drive. And then similarly, through the last couple of matchups that they've had against each other, Alabama could not initiate any offense. They still were in a situation where they could not run the football, and with the help of Kip Lewis and others on that stout-ass defensive line, not to mention Taylor Wine as well, and Heineke also R. Mason Thomas was even back in this game, as they would mention later on, although I didn't know it at first. They put the utmost pressure on Ty Simpson, and there was nothing he could do about it. Like, you automatically had Kip Lewis getting out here and making plays, like he'd been doing all season long. Even Cortland Guillory, on one of these first drives, managed to get himself a deflection without fouling, if you can believe that. Through the first 3 drives, like it was in the last matchup, Alabama went 3 and out. They did not have a single point after the first quarter, and it took them a while to get going, because my understanding was, at this point, if you're Alabama, and if you have any understanding of how Brett Venables runs his defenses, the blitz is coming. The way to counter that, more often than not, is going to consist of quick reads. Like protection, you can ask for it all you want to. It's not going to be a 100% guarantee that you will get it. And that is exactly what Alabama was facing at the time. But Oklahoma, although they came into this thing as essentially the worst offense out of any team, any of the teams, even mentioning Group of 6 schools, the worst offensive team in the CFP, they were teeing off on Alabama at a certain point. I shit you not. You got Mateer getting Doms over to, I think it was J.V. Gibson and also Robinson before cutting up for an 8-yard touchdown run, just unloading all the moves on the defense, which just makes it even more difficult to account for him in space. If you're telling me that he, with his frame already, is now going to be pulling off elusive tactics in order to advance the football. It's difficult to deal with. Sandal is also just a fucking unit. I mean, you even got them in a situation where they would kind of stall out a little bit on their next drive after the touchdown. But Sandal, the winner, most recent winner now, of the Lou Groza Award, well deserved with the way he's been kicking the ball this season, wouldn't really change there. As he just banged in a 51-yard field goal like it was nothing in the heat of the night. Like, that's just fucking wild. Then, to keep it going, although this team would like to initiate the run, Oklahoma, even when you look at the tail end of the game, they didn't really run the ball well, particularly. They just did not. It wasn't as efficient as you would expect. But they were able to continue to get chunk plays down the field. Deion Burks and Mateer had the connection going early. He got this massive catch near the sideline to pick up a first down before getting himself another 18-yard gain. And then eventually, John Mateer would be in a goal-to-go situation with the team, and they, knowing just how much Alabama wanted to focus on Mateer so badly, they faked the quarterback draw. They had him step up for just a second, act like he's going to run, and then that collapsed the defense enough to bring backers forward, even though the man who would leak out, Isaiah Satania III, is going to be quicker than every single one of them. But at the very least, you'd want some concentration back there to distract Mateer from throwing it in that direction. And with that collapsing down, there was no there's no way to deter this pass from going into Satania III's direction, and he would promptly get himself a 7-yard touchdown catch. A 17-0 run just like that to open the game. On a night where, again, Alabama was absolutely looking to extend their season. They were not trying to go out to this team again, and especially in this way. Like, this is probably the best start Oklahoma has had, you could say, against a Power 4 team in terms of strictly offense all season long. And it was well timed, right? You're in playoff football. This is exactly what you've been waiting to see from this team. And in an instant, the script flipped. 100%. Because you want to know what Alabama proceeded to do next? They would rip off 24 unanswered points. And not in the sense of we're going to consistently have our offense contribute to any and everything we're doing. Although they did get some hot starts, mainly by Latsier Brooks. And I just want to make this very clear, because it's crazy. They mentioned at a point that Latsier Brooks was a true freshman. And in a situation where you needed players to step up, because, quite frankly, at this point, Jeremy Bernard was still being held in check, and Ryan Williams, they still just didn't have enough trust in the man. We'll get to Ryan Williams later, though. But Latsier Brooks was the star of the night for this Crimson Tide team. Simpson and he just had the chemistry. And again, this is a true freshman getting the work done. So on this damn fourth down, they get all the way down the field, and I can't blame them for going for it. Absolutely had to. Right? This man literally just gets a flurry of juke moves past the defense and then corkscrews into the fucking end zone from 10 yards out for a touchdown. And then the worst streak of potential luck just starts to ensue. Because it's one thing to allow a touchdown, but hey, you still have a chance to get your momentum going, right? Wrong. Now, I watched this play in post because as I'm hearing this through play-by-play, you have Robinson, the running back for Oklahoma, get deep on a post route, and he dropped it, and he was wide open for a score. Watching it in post made it look even more egregious. Like he had daylight in his sights if he focused solely on just bringing the ball down. And even if you don't score somehow, that's a massive gain off the board just like that. And what proceeded to happen next was a blocked kick. Just keep that in mind too. That would be the theme for a lot of the CFP games here. But that's just not something you can have if you are trying to maintain momentum in a ball game. And while Oklahoma's defense would hold up with Jones being able to bury Simpson in the backfield and force the field goal for Tulane, a player who they said themselves had been one of the worst kickers in terms of accuracy rate in the Power 4, and honestly, that's not hard to see. Things got even worse for Oklahoma on this next possession. And it's literally on Mateer at that point. Now, watching this in post, the wide receiver here was trying to run a streak. I don't know if there was a miscommunication or not. If Mateer was trying to get him to come back to the football or anything like that. But all I know is that as soon as that ball was released, Zabin Brown, the D-back for the Crimson Tide, jumped right on it and got himself a 50-yard pick six. Just clean like that. And in just a matter of a few minutes, you went on your own personal run just to have them pitch back 17 unanswered points on your head. Ultimately, to take it to halftime, Oklahoma would have their last possession. They'd get the ball back, but they couldn't do anything simply because of Yonjay Pierre and Deontay Lawson holding them in check for long enough to keep them at bay. The third quarter would see Alabama continue to take control, and not even in the most dominant way imaginable, although they did have sequences where they were initially stopped by this Oklahoma defense. Thing is, their offense would completely revert back to their old ways. You had Mateer continue to be as inaccurate as possible, and pair that up with the fact that the pressure was now coming for Mateer at this point, as Keeley, Yonjay Pierre, and also Simmons were able to get sacks on multiple occasions on one of their next drives here to force multiple 3-and-outs in the third quarter alone. That gave Alabama enough time to eventually put more points on the board, and I underestimated it at that point. I don't know why I said 24 unanswered points. I meant 27. It was continued by the fact that Daniel Hill Jr. would probably have the most productive run of the day for either side, which wasn't consistent, but in that moment for Alabama, they definitely needed that. Because Ty Simpson in just a couple of plays would proceed to throw an absolute dom down the field to Latsier Brooks, and he caught that with a little pirouette near the sideline for a 30-yard touchdown catch to give them a 24-17 lead. And they would ultimately get a field goal later on in the third quarter to give themselves a 27-17 lead. It was on Oklahoma to respond, and granted, it got far too out of hand at that point if you're giving up 27 consecutive points as an overall team, and not just because of the defense being weakened, but also because of self-inflicted wounds, giving them a short field to work with, and those are promptly the results you're going to get in those situations. They would get a solid drop to take it into the very start of the fourth quarter, though, as Mateer would ultimately get it over to Deion Burks, who had gotten himself an in-breaking route and started to just bust it all the way up the field for a 37-yard gain. You can say that he had been the most consistent receiver on the night for the Sooners, and it helped them get back in the game temporarily, but when they needed one play, just one play, to take them over the edge in this game, they could not get it. I mean, they were still letting Alabama get as close as possible down the field, as Isaiah Horton would get himself a 37-yard gain. They did have some good fortune, as Lewis would force a fumble and then Heineke would get a sack. but you're counting on your offense to pay it forward in that situation. And ever since that 17-0 run, up until a moment of absolute desperation, they hadn't done it, and that continued. You can't have a situation, if you're Oklahoma, where you get in manageable third down situations. That's exactly what you'd want. And that was also the goal for Alabama, to avoid having themselves get in similar territory as a result of Oklahoma's blitz. Yet you still have a false start penalty and then proceed to have an incomplete pass. You have no other choice but to punt in that situation. And ultimately, when it came down to it, the dagger would come from none other than Daniel Hill Jr. getting himself a 6-yard touchdown run to give them a 34-24 lead. The rest of the game didn't really see a lot of action. Oklahoma was trying desperately to keep themselves in the ball game. It wasn't completely over, especially with the week of football that we've gotten in general. And oh man, in future videos to come, we're going to get into that aspect of things. Safe to say, Oklahoma still wasn't completely out of it. But you had to, sooner rather than later, get yourself at least a touchdown, or at least some form of scoring to make this a one-possession ball game as quickly as possible, or you were not coming back in this one. What would proceed to happen is back-to-back 3-and-out spurts for both teams. And then Oklahoma would make a little progress. They'd get down the field. They got a crucial 38-yard gain from J.V. Gibson on 4th and 5 to ultimately get them in Alabama's red zone. And it looked like they could honestly make something out of that. The only thing was Deontay Lawson had other plans in store for this squad. And once it got down to 3rd and much longer, they couldn't convert it. No problem, though. You have the Lou Groza Award winner in Sandal kicking for you. You're surely going to make this a one-possession lead. He missed it. And that came with around 3 minutes left in the game. So now it's going to be exponentially difficult for Oklahoma to make something happen. And even then, even after this sequence, they did force a stop on Alabama. They would get the ball back. They'd have to move quick because you were limited. Even though first down stops the clock after the 2-minute warning. They got in decent range for Sandal, who had previously made a 51-yard field goal earlier in the game, and he ended up missing again, unfortunately. Thus, Alabama would win 34-24. But this game is simply not on Sandal. You can't blame Sandal for that. Would it have helped for them to get at least a field goal out of them in that situation? Yes. If we're shortening that to one possession, absolutely. But Oklahoma had their fair share of chances, as I've went through this entire time. And they did not get it done, for the most part. Even when they were up 17-0, 17-7, even 17-10, they shot their damn selves in the foot. And it had nothing to do with the leg of Sandal. It had everything to do with how inept they were playing on offense. And when they're usually playing inept on offense, which has been most of the fucking season, even in some situations against non-conference opponents, Sandal has bailed them out more times than you can count this year. He's been that automatic. That's why he got the accomplishments he got this year. So honestly, I'm willing to give him a little bit of grace on that. Because your offense, it's been a long time coming for them to finally step the fuck up and get some shit done. And they were doing it. They were doing it for the first quarter and change of this game. And then all of a sudden, they just completely snapped back into their older fucking habits throughout the season. Sandal can't do anything about that. He just cannot. I can tell you that right now. But for Alabama, in what was deemed to be an important game for some reason. People kept on throwing around the notion that if Alabama had gotten beaten bad, DeBoer would have left for Michigan or something like that, or they would have tried to run him out of town. So we can put all that to rest now, I suppose. Like, I genuinely don't understand why people would think that he'd take that job, but that's neither here nor there for me. Regardless, strong performance. It wasn't the prettiest for them. And again, the score doesn't tell you the full story of this. Like, you simply had multiple runs take place in this game. It wasn't a true back and forth battle. It was a little bit of madness there. But Alabama ultimately came out on the right side of things and responded well to the constant pressure that they faced from Venables in this unit. Like, it wasn't a clean game for Todd Simpson at all. But even with that being said, even with them trying to rattle him, and in cases they were able to, he did a great job of continuing to hold strong, hanging in there. And ultimately, the team as a whole, what ended up helping at the end of the day is that they held on to the football. And when they got themselves in situations in the red zone, especially in the second half, they did a better job of converting. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. Now, Todd Simpson in this game had 232 passing yards and 2 touchdowns on 62.1% completion. Latsier Brooks had 5 receptions for 79 yards and 2 touchdowns. Isaiah Horton had 5 receptions for 65 yards. And Josh Cuevas had 4 receptions for 43 yards. And Jeremy Bernard had 3 receptions for 40 yards. And it is here that we have to address Ryan Williams. Because one of the things I was saying was that, hey, if you are going to have these quick reads, if you need to get these passes off quickly, you have to find a way to get Ryan Williams a football at some point. Take some pressure off and get him out in space because you know that he can make plays. Well, that's not how this went at all. And I guess it's a testament to how things have been for him the entire season. Man, they rarely looked his way in this game. And even when they did, the nation leader in drops continued to do exactly that. For a while in this game, he was held without a catch. Not for a lack of effort per se, but literally, you have Alabama favoring every other wide receiver out there because they think that in a way they are far more reliable of a target in that moment than Ryan Williams could be. Drops have definitely been a struggle for him all season long, but this is the culmination of everything. A season on the line. The game is hanging in the balance, and they don't trust you enough to feed you the football. Even in the rare occasions where they gave him targets in this game, he didn't come away with anything. I'm telling you, literally, through the first 3 quarters. Pretty much throughout the entire game, he didn't have anything. The one catch he did have that I watched him post came on an RPO play when it's already 3rd and long, and they're just trying to drag out the ending of the game or get as closer to it as they possibly can. The man still bobbled that around. This is a short route, and he still bobbled the fucking ball in his hands, struggled to bring it down, but got it somehow. Like, that should be a wake-up call for him. That should truly be a wake-up call for him. No disrespect to Waddle Clone, but Brooks is legitimately a true freshman. The same situation Ryan Williams was in last year. And he's getting more concentration, more attention from Todd Simpson when it comes to distributing the football than you right now. It's like, what exactly is going on? And that's a damn sad thing. I don't know if they would necessarily resort to it. Because at the end of the day, he's still that damn good. But bruh, you're literally having him getting frozen out at this point by the coaching staff because of just how much trust they have seemingly lost in his ability simply to secure the catch. Like, he's got all the dynamic qualities and intangibles that you could ask for, I would think. But, man, goodness gracious. As for Oklahoma, man, John Mateer had 307 yards and 2 touchdowns with an interception on 63.4% completion. Ironically enough, that completion percentage might have been one of the highest marks he's had all season. But at the end of the day, that pick, right before the end of the half, mind you, right to Brown, just can't fucking happen. And if you want to say that he's the leader of this team, man, he simply just... whole team cratered. And it didn't help that, again, they weren't really able to initiate the run at all. I don't know why they trusted Blaylock still, especially when Robinson had been giving them better contributions on the ground as of late. But overall, either way, would that have helped? I don't know. They ran for a combined 55 yards on 33 carries. Again, Alabama, looking at it, they only had 32 yards on 23 carries. So it wasn't really dictated by the run game at all. But you knew that ball control and true efficiency was going to be the key to success. And instead, you had the ball for around 33 minutes, so you won that battle, but you weren't efficient at all. You, after that point in time, couldn't even bear to move the ball down the field because you kept getting limited with the same kind of pressure that they would unload on Alabama's offense. It's damn ironic, too. Yes, Venables is a defensive mind, and you have a true offensive coordinator calling plays for this Oklahoma squad. My thing is, though, you could at least give some pointers. If you recognize that they are utilizing the same tactics against you that you've used against them, you, of all people, should know how to stop it and counter it. And Oklahoma could not figure that out at all themselves. Dion Burks, had 7 receptions for 107 yards and a touchdown. Truly a good game by him, but for naught, honestly. Jermichael Carter had 3 receptions for 46 yards, and J.V. Gibson had 2 receptions for 41 yards. Blaylock also had 5 receptions for 36 yards, and Kanak had 4 receptions for 22 yards. Similar thing here as well, and again, there were some misses. But if Satania III is your burner, if he's your burner, you'd probably want to get him the ball more times than just handing him 2 receptions and calling it a night, even if he scored the touchdown. And that was just the theme of ineptitude for this damn offense throughout the entire game. It was wild. All that talent on the defensive end, knowing that that's just going to be the last game they may play for this team, depending on what their class is at this point of time. So it absolutely sucks from that perspective. But is Alabama supposed to care? Hell no. They're rolling. It's a tremendous game from them. They looked strong in this one. And that definitely shows you that, like, hey, this is still the same Alabama team that we're accustomed to. You know, they had to battle back, but they can be battle tested and still give you their own wave of punches to win the battle. And that's going to at least continue to carry them into the flow of the next few games that they may have on the docket. Especially when you consider that they're going to be facing off against Indiana in the Rose Bowl. And that's pretty interesting in and of itself, too. Usually, in years past, it would be the Pac-12 and Big Ten champions facing off against each other in the Rose Bowl. But the game is being played there, and that could be That could be incredibly interesting. I mean, hey, Mendoza the fifth won the Heisman, but people have constantly been trying to throw Todd Simpson in that conversation, and granted, for a while he was in it until he kind of declined over the last few weeks. So I guess those guys will finally be able to see, hey, which is the better of the two. Those defenses are also some of the best in the nation. Alabama's a little weaker, but man, that could be an interesting game. Moving on to number 10 Miami at number 7 Texas A&M in College Station. Nothing could have prepared me for what ended up happening in this game. Hearing it in play-by-play, tracking it through play-by-play, let alone what I was able to watch of it in post through highlights. And yet, ironically enough, you could say that out of the CFP action, this was truly, by nature, the most competitive game that we had. Think about that. This right here was the single most competitive game we had in the entire first round. And the additional bowl game that I watched. I'll tie that in later, because again, CFP is the priority here. We expected this from Miami's defense, in a way. The goal for them from the onset was to continue to limit this Texas A&M offense. And, they had already been stumbling into the CFP themselves, but their offense really thrived off of explosive plays all season long. You've seen what Concepcion has been able to do after the catch. You've seen what Craver had been doing after the catch as the nation's leader in yards after the catch for most of the season. And they even had Le'Veon Moss back in this game. So that could have added another element to things for them if they were able to get that going. Not only did they fail to do that, but I think at some point of time, Le'Veon Moss got hurt as well, which truly derailed Texas A&M even further at this point. They legitimately could not finish drives. And that goes for Miami's offense as well. Although we didn't anticipate that from Texas A&M's defense, even though I pointed out some of the solid players that they have on their end. It was a true and blue defensive struggle, but you also have weather play an element. At a point in time, I didn't watch it live, but after a while, they kept mentioning through play-by-play just how windy it was. I didn't know it at the time. But you just got missed kick after missed kick after blocked kick. And I'm like, okay, I had to look for that intently when I was watching it back. They said at a point there were 14 mile per hour winds with gusts up to 30 miles per hour. That is a scary mission. And you can argue that probably affected the passing game a little bit as well. It definitely affected some of the kicks that I saw. And then there were others that it's just like, okay, what were you doing? There was one that was just pushed so damn far to the right that it's like, okay, the wind wasn't going to do anything about that shit. That shit was already off. And I think that was the Miami kicker. Then you also had just some of the... Where does shit go down? When you are limited like that through the air, you're going to have to get creative despite an opposing defense knowing what you're going to do, especially one as strong as the Hurricanes coming into this. Ruben Bain Jr. continued to inflict nightmares on the Texas A&M offense, but it wasn't just him. You had other guys stepping up like Scott, like Torrey, like Bizanth, and I think one of them ended up getting injured at some point, unfortunately, so you hope that they get better with time. They were all on Marcel Reed's ass. There was a specific play I was watching late. He was trying to evade a sack for some reason. He kept doing all this dancing around and shit. Nobody was fooled by that. And ultimately, he got pummeled in the backfield. That's just how this goes around here. like this Texas A&M defense as well, they were able to inflict a good amount of pressure, I'll say that, on Becht. The only thing was that in terms of stopping the run, they couldn't really stop the run. Like, literally, at a point in this game, Carson Becht, at some point in, like, the first half, legitimately had a stat line that read 6 of 8 passing for 9 yards. And he didn't finish with the most impressive outing through the air. You can say that, honestly, neither quarterback really did. Even when you look at it in totality and think to yourself, okay, Marcel Reed was able to get a little more volume here, a little more yardage dispersed out to everybody. That doesn't mean he was effective. But it was always something for both teams. When they got in plus territory, Miami for a while struggled to even get across the 50-yard line for the longest period of time. And even when one team was able to, something always came up. Like, literally, you had a promising possession from the Aggies here that was stopped by a sack fumble. And then, not to mention, all the missed field goals that I've gone through. Even Texas A&M themselves, for whatever reason, decided to go for it on 4th down. That ultimately led to the missed field goal to kick it into halftime. Luckily for everybody, Miami would open up the third quarter nicely with a field goal themselves. And then that would promptly be followed up by Marcel Reed getting worked by a true freshman for his first interception of the game. That wouldn't even be the last time. But still, off those miscues, neither team could truly make the other one pay. And it got to a point in the fourth quarter where Texas A&M, they already, without having a point, without even really being sure of what exactly they were trying to do, had to go in desperation mode. And for a while, Concepcion and Craver had been limited in this game. This drive right here would truly see Ashton Bethel Roman come through. Now, again, this was the same drive where, as I mentioned, Ruben Bain Jr. got Marcel Reed completely slacking on whatever he was trying to do here. But Ashton Bethel Roman would get multiple catches on this drive. He single-handedly contributed to multiple conversions. And as a whole, the Texas A&M squad, even if you account for penalties leading to first downs here, they went on a pretty good 5 of 6 conversion rate on 3rd down to continue to keep this drive going. Because at that point, they're like, okay, we've got to go for everything. We need to get on the board. We need to get down and score. Do something to instill some life in this team, because we are going through it right now. Now, Mesidor, one of their other edge rushers for the Hurricanes, would ultimately stop Marcel Reed in the backfield before forcing them to settle for a field goal. You fought that hard. It was a 7-minute drive. And like I think they mentioned here, 16 plays. But they finally could say that, okay, we've evened up the game. We've got some momentum back. Let's try to make something happen. It looked even better because Malachi Tony in this game was also on and off a little bit, you could say. Like, granted, he'd been a reliable target. And there was even a scenario where they got a tremendous punt return from him in the first half. Tremendous punt return. He ended up getting shoestring tackle. The defender got a piece of his foot, and he ended up tripping himself over. As tough as that shit was, they still didn't do anything. They still proceeded to do nothing after that. Not a damn thing. At all. Fucking crazy, man. But it would get a little worse for him because he, despite being a good receiver out of the backfield for most of the game. They'd been using him on a few gadget plays. He got this catch here and ended up picking up the first down. But Dalton Brooks, one of the, names on that Texas A&M defense, he would make his mark right then, right there, by punching the ball right out of his hands and getting a clean fumble recovery to go. All of a sudden, it was looking promising for Texas A&M, despite being unable to start Mark Fletcher Jr. in the rushing attack, who had gotten near 100 yards at that point. Or at least at that mark, I believe. Yet still, when they needed a drive, they could not put anything together. The run game, if anything, had been putting them ahead of the sticks to go balls to the wall on offense and start to spread the ball around, get vertical down the field, do everything. You could almost say that they're like an NFL team that I'll be talking about soon, in terms of having every part of their offense work through the rushing attack. Because once Miami was able to prevent them from getting ahead of schedule and from getting, good work out of the running backs, out of the backfield, and even limiting Marcel Reed enough to not allow him to become a threat as a runner either, nothing else was really that effective. They had to settle for taking what the Miami defense was giving them at that point. They couldn't force the action over the top all that much. Even though they had a play, at least one play, that went for 50 plus yards. It was a long time ago. And this would not be the case here, as Bain Jr. would once again haunt Reed in his sleep, essentially, and get them the ball back. Ultimately, the Hurricanes would game it in multiple ways. The MVP of this game, no doubt, was Mark Fletcher Jr., who would run 17 times for 172 yards, including this 56-yard run that damn near put the dagger in the Aggies' heart right then and right there, already putting them in field goal range. And it wasn't just, your standard 56-yard run. No, he got about a good amount of extra yardage on that play, simply just taking Dalton Brooks for a fucking ride with him, carrying him the whole way. For at least a good portion of that run. They got down the field and they continued to lean on Mark Fletcher Jr. because why would you not in that situation? He'd been that dominant all game long as a power back for them. And it got even better once Malachi Tunney got his retribution, which I did end up seeing live. It was on ABC. We got the tail end of that in enough time to see this go down. Good little sweet play to him, pop pass, and he took it straight to the house. You'd probably advise him to not do that in that situation. My thinking was, okay, you'd probably want to get the first down, but the fact that the Aggies had already used all their timeouts, man, why even bother trying to give them another chance? Yet, hey, if you're that open, I guess you're going to score. My understanding in that situation would be proven correct, though. Texas A&M did put together a little bit of a drive. And again, not necessarily through many explosive plays, but they were dinking and dunking their way down the field, and the shit was working. It helped that they ended up getting a roughing the passer penalty here to advance them even further forward. But Marcel Reed had some solid, progressions. And ultimately, you got this play here to, I think it was Berkshire. Man, that shit was damn near a pick. And if Marcel Reed didn't have that kind of velocity, he put on that specific pass right there, that was going to get intercepted. Keep that in mind. No, literally. Just think about that for a second. You got that close to turning the ball over right there, but you lucked out. There's no way that you actively put yourself in a situation where you get even close to putting the ball in harm's way again, right? Literally, to end the game. To end the game. They're at the 5-yard line at this point. It's third down. But honestly, I get the context of wanting to pass. You can't really afford to run in that situation. Because, like, if you don't get enough on the play, you probably have to spike the football being out of timeouts. And you don't leave yourself with enough time to get a different play reset. So I can understand it. Still, there had to have been a better way to engineer a pass play than simply thinking about putting the ball in any sort of tight window like that. Literally, this pass is getting thrown in the back of the end zone, essentially. And it's like, you honestly have the man. He was open. But the window, as they said on the broadcast, the window that Reed needed to get this pass over to was way further over here. Way further over to this side of the screen, essentially. And he proceeded to throw it behind him, allowing the same true freshman who picked him off the first time to pick him off again for the game and give Miami the 10-3 win. And again, what was truly a defensive struggle, but also, ironically enough, depending on, how you view it, no matter how ugly you think this game was, it was the most competitive one. By nature. Again, it was a pleasant surprise to see the Aggies defense playing like that. But ultimately, if you're going to continue to flop in the red zone like that as a unit, and not just in, failing to get touchdowns. No, you're not even getting anything out of this at all. Coming into this, Texas A&M was on the better end of offenses in the CFP, remaining. And you proceed to not do anything at all. Who would have believed me if I told you that when these teams were selected? And I probably said, hey, okay. In talking about the projections of these matchups here in ways, just kind of trying to set the stage for them, one would envision that, okay, this would probably be a bit more high scoring at the very least. And that didn't happen. That didn't happen. That's the main takeaway for Aggies fans. I would think that they should be proud of their defense. But the ineptitude on special teams and the lack of genuine effectiveness on offense ultimately came back to hurt them more than it did the Hurricanes. There aren't really a lot of numbers worth mentioning like that unless you give credit to the defenses. I mean, you gotta think about this from Miami's perspective. You'd been hearing all this time about just how dynamic this Texas A&M offense has, and they proceeded to shut them down completely. 7 total sacks and 7 tackles for loss to go along with those 2 interceptions. They completely locked them down everywhere, all over the field. And they, as a unit, deserve a ton of fucking credit for that. Simply put, especially Bain Jr. putting together a 4-tackle game where he had 4 tackles for loss and 3 sacks by himself. There's no question as to why people view him as one of the better remaining players left in the CFP and one of the top draft picks next season. He played like it when he absolutely needed to. And that shit matters, especially in a game that is that close. Because as they always say, players make the fucking plays. And in Ruben Bain Jr.'s case, he prevents said players from making plays. It's as simple as that. Like, Marcel Reed, this is the shit with him. Literally. 237 yards on 64.1% completion ain't the worst. But the 2 picks, the indecision in the pocket, the inaccuracy on seemingly routine throws, and especially on those times of tight window throws like the one he was attempting at the end of the game. He is still young. He's a sophomore, so he's got time to improve. But man, if he doesn't figure that shit out, he's going to have problems. He's going to have problems. He's a hell of an overall dual threat quarterback. But that is how he takes that next step forward. And if he fails to do so, then it's like, okay. Goodness gracious. Mario Craver still had 7 receptions for 92 yards. And yeah, as I mentioned, he had a 59-yard catch earlier in the game. I did end up seeing that one. He had a couple steps, because I was thinking initially, upon watching it in real time from the highlights, like, okay, there's no way he caught that. All right, he got his feet down. He made the football move. It could have been worse, though, because it got punched out of bounds. But he was right near the sideline, so it's not like anything was going to happen there once the ball crossed the boundary. Ashton Bethel Roman had 4 receptions for 44 yards, and Casey Concepcion had 4 receptions for 33 yards. I'm sure that I would expect players from this Texas A&M team, especially when you look at Concepcion, a few of them are probably going to declare for the NFL draft. And they deserve to. But it's like, man, this is a just truly tough way to go out. Because with it being that competitive, with it being that physical of a game, maybe weather affected it a little bit too. But you still had your fair chance of making something happen here. And you just don't even get to that point at all. You're literally right there with the game on the line, with a chance to tie it and potentially go in overtime. I think for what would have been the first overtime game in this short CFP history. But instead, you get yourself in a spot where you now lose to a road team, which would also be in short history the second time that a road team goes to beat somebody else in a CFP playoff game, with obviously Alabama being the first team to do so just a few short hours before. So that was normal. But on to that competitiveness into the first of the G6 action between number 11 Tulane and number 6 Ole Miss. Dear goodness. Dear goodness. Even as I was watching it, somebody pointed out, and we knew that already, and it's like, okay, this is a rematch. You can't possibly be serious about this. You can't possibly be doing this to Tulane or Ole Miss. You think Ole Miss wanted to do this to Tulane again? Do you really think they cared about seeing them again? Probably not. I just thought that a better fight could be put up here. Instead, they were the first of the two to fall victim to the TNT curse. Like, legitimately. Damn near every time. And again, CFP, this iteration of the CFP has a short history. But every single time we've had a fucking game on there. Every single time we've had a game on there. Alright? You have somebody just getting their ass beat. We knew it was SMU last year when Penn State beat the shit out of them. And ever since then, it's just gotten incredibly worse. This would be no different. And to be honest, it was actually looking fine. It was looking fine for Tulane. It was. Except for the fact that in literally just the first 5 plays of the game, without me even watching it live, having to watch it in post instead, 5 straight plays led to 5 different explosive plays, all greater than 20 yards down the field. And in just a span of around 2 minutes total, Ole Miss scored touchdowns, with Trinidad Chambliss banging his head on the whole goalpost, with Kwan Lacey continuing his dynamic season as a running back by banging his head on the goalpost. And what made matters even worse is that it took Tulane a lot longer to drive down the field themselves. Even as I was watching it back, the broadcasters made a really good point that if you're Tulane, you have to try to keep this as close as possible within the realm of a single possession. If you let it get out of hand early, you ain't going to be able to do enough to come back against this Ole Miss team. You're just not. And they fucking, like, they got such a good start on this drive. They had Retzlaff getting out of the pocket and making plays in the rushing attack. They had multiple third down conversions, including one Brown Stevens. They were doing what they needed to do, and then you proceeded to have Retzlaff throw one of the dumbest interceptions imaginable to Braxton. And you had a fucking penalty. Like, come on, man. You fucking screwed yourself over right there. Then to make matters even worse, they got some of the same flow going on the next drive and proceeded to turn the ball over on downs. Luckily for Tulane at that point. And what they may not get enough credit for is that since that point of time, they actually started to apply some pressure. And this was the key. I think I mentioned this point when it comes to that video where I went through, talking about some of these games and how they could end up going with the context of what the two teams had been able to accomplish all season long. They actually started to stop the Kwan Lacey experience. And once they were able to do that, there was a little bit of a struggle. They wanted to make sure that they put it all on Chambliss's arm without the threat of being able to disguise anything into a potential run or explosive play. Literally proceeded to throw 2 back-to-back incomplete passes on this draw, and, they would allow them, with a penalty, to get all the way down the field. But again, simply nothing too crazy over the top or on the ground to warrant a potential long touchdown. Instead, they were forced to settle for a field goal. This is a 17-3 ball game at halftime. And it could have been worse given that they had gotten a good drive in the 2-minute drill from Chambliss. However, as Chambliss was attempting to run for the first down, which he would eventually get, as I saw, he went down with an injury for a brief second, and they subbed Austin Simmons back in, who had lost his spot on the team earlier in the season to Chambliss. Ironically enough, he would actually throw a couple dots and then proceeded to get sacked by Dyson for a sack fumble in the backfield. Tulane didn't really have enough time to do much of anything with the ball, but that helped. That was something. That was progress. And it would never be in doubt again for Ole Miss. While Tulane's defense had been playing well to start out the game, they proceeded to give up 24 unanswered points to start off the second half. You have yourself another drive filled with explosives, ending in a Deshaun dribbling touchdown catch from 13 yards out. A field goal would follow that, and then while Tulane still had somewhat of a chance to respond at that point, Retzlaff himself would be stripped of the football, and ultimately that would lead to the touchdown on the ensuing drive, with Diggs, one of their backup running backs, getting himself in for a score. And yet again, Tulane, they were making progress, but they kept on fumbling the ball. It would literally happen again. This time in a sack fumble as they were trying to go for it on fourth down. And by that point, it had already been out of the realm of possibility for them to come back, and Chambliss sealed that deal with getting himself another rushing touchdown. Ultimately, while Tulane would have themselves a drive later on that they scored on. It's like, it was far too late. Like, yeah, the tight end had a pretty sneaky way to get in there, but it's like, okay, now you want to score? All right. Ole Miss would rematch and would convincingly, very, very much so, win the rematch. It wasn't even in doubt. 41-10, bro. Jeez, man. Chambliss in this game had a combined 318 yards in 3 touchdowns with 2 rushing on 79.3% completion. Kawan Lacey had 15 rushes for 87 yards and a touchdown. Alexander had 7 receptions for 87 yards. Deshaun Stribling had 5 receptions for 79. Wright had 4 receptions for 64 yards as well in this game. As for Tulane, Retzlaff had 306 passing yards on 57.1% completion, a touchdown and an interception. You could say that's a lot of that was garbage time at this point. Although, again, Tulane, for a while, they were moving the ball relatively well. You just have to be able to fucking close out drives. And that, again, like, literally, we're failing to do that throughout this so far. McClure had 15 rushes for 84 yards. And Preston, one of their wide receivers, had 5 receptions for 125 yards, while Brown Stevens added 6 receptions for 57 yards in this game. Then, man, Oregon, with that win, will face off against Texas Tech. Ole Miss, rather. Ole Miss has a rematch against Georgia. We know how that went the first time, and I already addressed that, again, in the previous video I did on CFP selection. So, we'll definitely see how that one goes this time. It's hard to beat teams twice in a single season, as we continue to say. That feels a little more likely, at least with their next matchup. But you gotta just appreciate that for Ole Miss. They managed to get themselves in here, not necessarily be penalized at all by losing Kiffin, and yet proceed to have rematches in their first couple games of CFP action. It's pretty damn crazy. Moving on to number 12, number 12, James Madison. At number 5, Oregon and Autzen. It kind of went the same way. This shit was so crazy that even after this 41-yard touchdown catch by Johnson for the Oregon squad, they tried to go for fucking 2. It wasn't all bad for James Madison. They did exactly what I would have wanted them to do on this drive. They took 8 minutes off the clock. They were driving down the field, 63 yards. They got themselves in the field goal range, and it wasn't just on some fluky shit either. Like, one of the first runs that Wayne Knight had, and Wayne Knight, they absolutely trusted. He had a solid game despite everything. Alonze Barnett III actually got a fucking massive block on the free rusher trying to set the edge and stuff Wayne Knight in the backfield to get him bouncing to the outside and ultimately getting that large gain down the field. And I'm not just saying that to say that. Like, legitimately, I watched that block. He lit his ass up. Now, that's what you want to see from your fucking quarterback right there. And it got Wayne Knight fed. He got down the field. They would continue to implement the running game a little bit as they got closer to territory, but once they were forced to throw the football, they could not hear, and they would have to settle for a field goal. The thing that killed James Madison was honestly their defense. Yes, you know, some of the lapses on offense and the turnovers were going to be inevitable at that point against a solid Oregon team. I don't think they could have played a game completely clean against them. But you just allowed them at every turn, even when it looked like James Madison could potentially have an avenue to get something going. yo, they just continue to get gashed, and at that point, it does come down to talent, but damn, like a 40-yard gain down the field leading to a Dante Moore touchdown run. And then you proceed to have a blocked field goal, even when you get into territory again. That would have made it a one-possession game, but instead, you have a fucking 10-point swing just like that because you allow them to get down the field in 1 minute and 34 seconds with Hill Jr. for this team running for a fucking 56-yard touchdown run. Just like that. And it just did not really get much better before it got worse towards the end of the first half. Literally, they went 3 and out on this possession before another score that literally took just 1 minute and 10 seconds, with McClellan getting in for a catch. Then they punted again, despite what looked to be a pretty good pass to Ellis. And ultimately, they again settle for nothing, while having Malik Benson get a 46-yard touchdown catch down the field. Like, it's not like they didn't have their own explosive plays. Matter of fact, the one that I saw from one of their other wide receivers in Dejanaro makes him out to be potentially a better passer, or more accurate passer than Barnett the third looks like. I mean, yes, this was a trick play. This was a double pass, and the read was open, but he threw that ball on a fucking string, and that was probably one of the more productive passing plays that they'd had for a while in this. Before we knew it, it was 34-3 in this game. So, yes, it got incredibly bad. However, it wasn't perfect for Oregon either. At a point in this game, yeah, Dante Moore had like 91% completion. This isn't the first time he's done that, by the way. So he wasn't just completely stat padding against this Duke squad. But they did also force him into mistakes. They managed to get an interception on him and ultimately get the ball back to score a field goal before the end of the half. They started to get their offense going a little bit in the second, too. They scored 2 touchdowns in the third quarter. And again, yeah, everybody wants to use the argument that, oh, okay, they put these numbers up against backups. Well, how do you explain the fact that Dylan Thieneman, one of their D-backs, or linebackers in this case, was still out there actively playing? So you can imagine that a good amount of the starters for this Oregon squad were still out there, still playing. And the offense sure as hell was. Like, again, the stuff is crazy. Oh, my goodness. Dejanaro would get himself a 47-yard touchdown catch. And while Oregon would rip off a couple more touchdowns here, with Benson yet again getting over the top for a 45-yard score, made no sense, too. At that point, the defender had to choose. You either guard that or you guard the inside route. Because they just completely fucked. Like, they weren't even set in the defensive stance at all from what I saw. Hey, they replayed it time and time and time again on the highlights. And, like, at that point, you're just completely lost. No matter where you choose, he's going to torch you. And in that indecision, as soon as Dante Moore saw that, yeah, Benson absolutely had it. They also managed to get a blocked punt here. But from there, it was really James Madison the rest of the way. They forced an interception on Dante Moore again and got salty, I guess. They started pushing the guy on the sidelines and all of that. And they gave one of the other linebackers on Oregon's squad unsportsmanlike conduct. Now, again, like, yes, you're beating the shit out of them. You are. Nobody can deny that. But you can't be mad at them for spoiling your chances at trying to run up the fucking score. You can't be mad at that. They got the pick on you. Like, what the hell are... Come on, bro. You already have exactly what you're asking for in the advantage here. Can you really be surprised? They would rip off a couple more touchdowns here with James Madison getting Petaway in for a 24-yard touchdown catch. And then in the fourth quarter, having drives of 89 and 99 yards. With Dupre getting in for a 2-yard rushing touchdown, and also Alonze Barnett, the third, getting in for a 1-yard rushing touchdown, with a 2-point conversion to ultimately make the game 51-34 at the end of it. I mean, hey, bro. Man, there's been a lot going around when it comes to their inclusion and Tulane's inclusion in the CFP. And all I'm going to say about it is that if the CFP expands to 16 teams next season, if it does, you're more than likely going to have 2 group of 6 bids automatic in the new structure. That's probably how it's going to go. Oh, we don't want to see Tulane or James Madison play football. We want to see the big dogs. And I was watching this video from a person who's an Alabama fan. And his point is honestly a fair one. It makes sense. Even as me being a fucking Ohio State fan, a fan of the team, that won the whole fucking thing last year, I can sit here and tell you right now that it's not just the SEC in the Big Ten and the ACC in the Big 12 that are the only schools playing football at this time. Clearly. Why the fuck do you think they call this Bowl Mania? You think those 4 conferences are the only ones that the college football world revolves around? In terms of money, yes. But the beauty of college football is that there are, again, a ton of different atmospheres that you get exposed to over the course of a given season. Hell, over the course of your entire time on a campus, just being around some of those places. And it gets you so passionate about this fucking game that you don't want to, if you have a chance to contend, you don't want to see that opportunity come to a close. You want to make sure that your team is in a position to continue fighting, because you would do anything in that given situation to support that team that you call your favorite, or support that team that is your home team, or however you've fostered a connection with that given squad. You want to see them keep going and ultimately reach the mountaintop in some fashion. And every single conference should have that right. Every single conference should have that right. Because at the end of the day, there are literally 128 schools and counting, with other schools set to come in to D1, I believe, FBS play. They do deserve their shot at some point. I guess y'all are so hard pressed and just so fucking traditional about having all of these big name schools into the conversation. But the mere second that they include 1 or 2 teams from group of 6 conferences, you lose your mind. You are absolutely fucking spoiled. You are absolutely spoiled. Because hell, you saw exactly what was going down when it was detailed that, okay, we're going to give automatic bids to the best team out of the group of 6. You saw some of the better seasons, regardless of however you want to detail their respective schedules. You saw them constantly beating up on each other throughout the season just to have a shot to get in. And Tulane rightfully got in. James Madison, again, as I said, had been killing it in the FCS for all that time, had been killing it once they started getting in the FBS, and to just understand how twisted it is, they had to rely on a 5-loss Duke team just to get their right to play in the postseason. That shit is fucked up. It truly is. And what did James Madison proceed to do? Yes, 14 of those points did come up against backup players in the fourth quarter. We can't deny that. But we also cannot sit here and deny that they put up 34 points. Only the second time Oregon's defense has allowed over 30 points all season long. And that other time was the Indiana team that proceeded to beat them in what was a historic victory for them in their school's history. They also combined for a total of about 500 fucking yards. No matter how much of that you may consider garbage time, it's in the stat book, it's in the history books forever, and you can't fucking erase that. Cry harder. Cry harder. Seriously. You are absolutely fucking spoiled if you can't handle two fucking teams from different conferences that are not of the major four, the power four. In this changing landscape, you best believe there's going to be some more love spread around to everybody else. That's just how it is. Now again, next year, again, if it changes, like James Madison would be a de facto team to get in there automatically. They had to luck out just because Duke ended up beating fucking trash-ass Virginia in the ACC. Instead of understanding that even if you do want to crap on their schedule, by nature, they did every single thing they needed to do to get in. And they won their conference title. Like, oh my, like literally. One of the first season they got in FBS play. And again, that's by the rules of the NCAA. They went undefeated and still were not in consideration, or were not deemed eligible enough to get in at that point. And they almost missed out again this year. So I, for one, was definitely excited to see them get in. And yes, it went about as you would typically expect. But in the same way, it didn't, on paper, look that bad, to be honest with you. It did not. And they got Oregon in situations where they forced them into mistakes. It wasn't a perfect pitch from Dante Moore like you'd be expecting. They got after him a few good times. And ultimately, there's going to be a point in which you have a situation where a group of 16 could potentially upset a Power 4 conference squad. And what the hell are you going to do then? Maybe you don't want it to be your team, but at the very least, man, you got to have some respect overall. Like another great point in that video that I'll definitely be sure to put in the cards somewhere. It's like, yo, you understand that even if these guys at these other schools aren't on the same plane in terms of recruiting, ranking, or anything like that, in terms of like 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, they may not be on the same level there. That's fine. That's fine. But they have just as much of a right to put it all on the line and play for something meaningful as the rest of these other people in any other fucking conference. So why the fuck should it matter? Why the fuck should it matter to just have two automatic bids in there for these other conferences to play towards something meaningful? The entire field is dominated by Power 4 teams as it is, which again, that comes down to money, obviously. But you also, again, you have Notre Dame, an independent school, actively having a chance. If they get into the top 12, it is written in documentation that they have a chance to get into the CFP automatically if they are a top 12 team. And we could be giving them a whole hell of a lot of shit for doing that. Only it makes sense for them because they're not in a conference and they can't play for a conference championship to secure it fully, and they have to be in the top 12. That is a fact. So we move on with that, but we can't give that right to a group of 6 team or a couple of group of 6 teams that potentially went out their schedule, that potentially went out their conference. We can't give that same grace there, and we have to bitch and complain the whole fucking time about that. That's like, no, that's fucked up. That's fucked up. And that shit has to stop. That has to stop. It has to stop, bro. Like, damn. Like, I understand, again, being in the Power 4, you don't want to give a complete and total leg up to the other conferences. But if you're going to constantly label yourselves that, well, you are the arbiters in ways of this entire thing. The entire committee is dominated by people from Power 4 programs. Think about that shit. And again, maybe that can make sense in a way. But again, you have that in mind. Yet even they ended up coming to a conclusion as a committee, with obviously some other language in there, that, hey, okay, we have room for a couple. So why is the discourse amongst general fan bases that, oh, we can't bear to have James Madison in Tulane in the fucking CFP? Because Texas should have gotten in, because Vanderbilt should have gotten in, because BYU should have fucking gotten in. And honestly, all of those schools, if it expands to a 16-team format next year, would say that they could honestly get in those situations. Just have some patience and shut the fuck up. Honestly, at that point, because all the talk around it is just you complaining. You're complaining actively. Like, damn, we understand that the team that you are probably a fan of remaining in this college football playoff, and hell yeah, I can fucking say that because I've been a fan of the team for over a decade. The Alabama fan has probably been a fan of the team since around the age of his fucking birth. Where those are teams that are actively in the driver's seat. And you are complaining and crying because some of the other guys with actual authority in the situation are saying, you know what? Yes, we have this fully concentrated with Power 4 schools. But you know what? We're going to give a chance to the other guys. We're going to give them a couple of chances. No, they're not anticipating a potential upset. But giving them a chance to play for something that could be truly impactful to their viability as a program. Truly. Like, of course, a lot of the concentration would be on Oregon in, say, a game like this. And I mean, their stars performed. They didn't have to do that much. Fine. But do you know what that kind of exposure could do for a school like that? Especially with the fact that after this game, Chesney Jr.'s going to UCLA now. And one of the things that I was seeing through my Fox Sports feed, even without looking at it fully, one of the main takeaways that this Fox Sports analyst RJ Young had from the situation was that JMU was going to be just fine without Chesney Jr. They're going to be just fine. And they could potentially get some extra ammunition from having potentially just a good set of eyes even if it's just a few in totality, looking at them, looking at what they put on display and saying, you know what, I want to go to James Madison. Even if it's going to be frowned upon. You know how many people came after Travis Hunter initially when he decided to flip from Florida State to Jackson State. Oh, they couldn't stand it. But with this in mind, with this in play, more of that could happen. And that could potentially become a little bit of the norm, more than the outlier, consistently. Like, it's not completely the case that you don't develop talent there at all that can go to the NFL. You find diamonds in the rough all the time. I still think back to hearing something about the fact that Brian Urlacher came from like New Mexico State or something like that. Watching one of the games last night, and again, I'm not going to fully recap it, but one of the Ellis brothers is from fucking Idaho? So you can't do that. You find diamonds in the rough all the time. And why would it hurt to get them just a little more exposure? I mean, damn, you got it all. You're set. Why are you crying? Like, come on, dude. They're getting out of watch on Friday. Okay. In the Gasparilla Bowl between North Carolina State and one of the other teams that was up for a Group of 5 bid for a while in Memphis. Oh, man. North Carolina State had full control of this game, and it wasn't even close. Literally, on play 1, they got themselves an explosive play down the field to Jackson. They were mentioning that Hollywood Smothers, their star running back, would be out of the game. I don't know if this was for injury. There was also just a mention of him or maybe somebody else potentially entering the transfer portal at the time. So I don't know which was which there. But this kid, Scott, that was in place of him, he would also have himself a pretty good game on the ground as well. And instantly, you had C.J. Bailey get himself a 14-yard rushing touchdown. Ironically enough, this is taking place in Florida. C.J. Bailey himself is also from Florida. And from multiple people, he's gotten the comparison to Lamar Jackson instantly. He's kind of wiry, but he's a little taller. And he's shifty as fuck. I'm not going to lie. Ultimately, Memphis, throughout the entire season, we know what the strength of their team has been. And hell, even when this core of people wasn't there, a lot of their strength has always relied upon them being able to run the football well. And at times, they were able to get their quarterback, Brendan Lewis, out in space on the ground. But in terms of their actual running backs, they were not able to initiate much of anything. They were constantly behind the sticks. And that worked right into North Carolina State's hands. On the rare occasions that they were able to spread the ball out to other wide receivers, it did pay off. They did get a deep third down conversion to one of their wide receivers in Bussey to convert a first down. And they got him the ball again to pick up another third down later in the drive. But when it came down to trying to impose their will on the run, those North Carolina backers were all over it. This guy, Fordham, is one of the better tacklers in the nation, and he would put that on full display on this fourth down stop on Peasant, one of their backup running backs. Instantly, you would have North Carolina State proceed to drive right back down the field as C.J. Bailey would just fire up a dime right over to one of their wide receivers in Grimes, and he got hit. He got level. He damn near got the wind knocked out of him. But he still found a way to spin around, extend his arm over the end zone line, and ultimately score the touchdown from 31 yards out to make this a 14-0 ball game. Even better for them, they would force Lewis into doing something incredibly wild. it wasn't all his fault. I mean, this hit right off the running back. Like, literally. And it hit right up into Fordham's hands, giving them an instant interception that he returned damn near all the way for a touchdown himself. Until North Carolina State substituted in Will Wilson. I'm not bullshitting. That's the backup quarterback's fucking name, Will Wilson. Think about that shit. He'd eventually get in for a 1-yard touchdown run. It just took a while for the Tigers to actually find their footing. Like, even when they started making some progress here, you had this guy miss a 56-yard field goal, which was kind of bold. I'm like, do you really think he's going to make that? I hadn't watched too much Memphis football, so I didn't know whether or not that was his body. But I'm like, damn, you trusting him with that? Okay. That did not end up working out so hot. It did not end up working out so hot at all. And North Carolina State would get themselves a field goal, ironically enough, with Vincent, their kicker, getting a 51-yard field goal to go. Yeah, literally. While the Tigers would get themselves on the board, finally being able to implement some portion of the run game and ultimately having their wide receiver in the short game, Hawkins. Oh man, this touchdown run was actually pretty fucking good. Like, he just bullied 3 different defenders on that Wolfpack defense to ultimately muscle his way into the end zone untouched after that. It was like, that was impressive. It's crazy, too, for Memphis, though, to look at it and understand that they had a graphic saying that they were one of the only 2 schools, the other one being Ohio, to have 3 players with at least 500 rushing yards and 7 or more touchdowns on the season and still be down like this. It was crazy. I mean, Scott himself, again, would do a great amount of that on this 35-yard run here before C.J. Bailey got the fucking easiest touchdown pass of his life over the top to Hoffman from 40 yards out. The game itself literally ended with the final score of 31-7, with North Carolina State really not having to do much of anything for the rest of the game. And the Tigers, they tried and could not do anything. They kept on punting the football. They even had a situation where they fumbled, and they continued to fail in terms of really making any progress once they got in plus territory outside of the lone touchdown drive. They couldn't initiate any of their style of offense. Like I said, North Carolina State had complete and total control in this one. So for the numbers, C.J. Bailey ended with 221 passing yards on 56% completion and 2 touchdowns. I don't think that completion percentage tells the whole story. He probably could have done better. He would have wanted to do better, but it don't tell the full story here. They were fine, regardless. This man, Scott, in relief of Smothers in some fashion, put together a 19-rush, 108-yard game. So, credit to him. Grimes had 3 receptions for 48 yards in the touchdown. Hoffman had the lone 40-yard touchdown catch. And Rogers had 2 receptions for 37 yards. Their tight end, Justin Jolie, they mentioned that he was a tweener. I didn't know that he was only like 6'3" and 235? Like, hey, he's been one of their more consistent weapons, though. But Memphis did make a mission at least to hold him in check, and that still didn't get the job done for him. At that point, what can you truly do? Fordham had 13 tackles, including 5 solo, an interception, and a pass deflection, and Soares Jr. had 12 tackles and 5 solo as well. As for Memphis themselves, quarterbacks, all 3 of their quarterbacks, combined for just 154 yards passing, a touchdown, and an interception on 58.8% completion. Like, yes, they had an advantage in the run game by the end of the game, but when it mattered, they truly couldn't run the football. So 149 yards on 4.1 yards per carry in this context doesn't really mean much to me, especially with watching the game live, looking at the flow of things, and understanding that even with all that volume, even with the efficiency, supposedly, by the end of the game, it didn't end up mattering enough to North Carolina State for them to be truly scared at all. And they couldn't stretch the ball down the field effectively enough to again invoke some kind of fear in the defense. And thus was the result of the Union Home Mortgage Gasparilla Bowl for this year. Just wanted to progress to that last and get the CFP done. But that'll do it for all the games that I've watched to this point. In terms of just a couple of developments here, I'm still working on handling anything that relates to the more development. That this video is not the place for that. I'll be working on that in no short order. But as for a couple of other ones, Arizona State, per Pete Thamel, would extend and also give a little bit of a raise to Kenny Dillingham's current contract. It is only right. Like, Kenny Dillingham has honestly brought some new life to this Arizona State program. And they've been in position to contend for the last couple of seasons. Not to mention their bowl eligibility. But they've honestly had a great amount of success. They continue to get it done in one-score games. They were just contending for the CFP title a year ago. So to, not extend him in a way would just make no sense. I didn't hear this at all as well, but there were also mentions of him potentially getting picked up by Michigan. I'm like, dude, no, he's not going anywhere. Why would Arizona State let him go anywhere? Like, he's good. He's been nothing but solid for them as a head coach to this point. And also, given with what I learned last year as they were on this course to contention about him being an alma mater of the program. Oh, you're going to need a lot more. You're going to need a lot more on your front if you are trying to lure him away to anywhere else. He is actively living with and fully bleeding Arizona State red and yellow. Actively burgundy and yellow. Why the fuck when he leave at a whim? What would he do that for? You have to think about this. You have to be smart. Ask yourself. There's no way that would happen. Unless they were given over a mammoth of a deal. And even still, you'd think he's just going to up and leave Arizona State and find himself having the same connections that he'd have there at other programs. Like, truly, the amount of times, especially last season even, and even this year, he's chilling, interviewing, and you have fucking crowds of students surrounding him. He resonates with those fucking kids. He is fully immersed in the fucking community. They can relate to him, and he is also a sort of beacon of light for them consistently with how he operates. You don't just replace that. It only came down to a little bit more money. So once they got that hashed out, there was no reason for him to move anywhere else. He was fucking staying. As for Iowa State, though, and honestly, I ain't gonna lie, he's a solid player, but maybe it is time with Matt Campbell now being gone, with having a new guy and Jimmy Rogers there, maybe it is time to let him move on, because it would be detailed also by Pete Thamel of ESPN that Rocco Becht, the quarterback for that school, is also planning to enter the transfer portal. Again, he's been a solid player for some time, and, he'll enter as a redshirt senior next year. He's been a respectable quarterback for this team over the years, but I don't know if people would consider him as a quarterback that can take a team over the top. Maybe that's not the goal, but, he's definitely gotten the production somewhat, yet this season, was a tremendous step back for him. I mean, he accounted last year for, I guess, solid overall numbers. One could definitely have their gripes about the 59.4% completion percentage, but you know what? He had, I believe, 33 total touchdowns, as seeing here, 9 interceptions. He was doing well for the program, and they put together a 10-win season across his tenure there. So it didn't, end without any sort of accomplishment at all. But when you're going to tell me, okay, that he, this season, accounted for 16 passing touchdowns and 9 interceptions, it's a horrible ratio. He was very much a passive quarterback, a very conservative one in nature. And it worked against Iowa State more often than not. Now again, when you can run the ball the way that they've been running the ball with Hansen, with Abu Sama III, it's going to take some pressure off, but that wasn't necessarily working to the same way that it did last season, when you saw Abu Sama III literally running roughshod through the snow against K-State for that massive game. Obviously, that's just looking at one, but you didn't get that kind of output from them to that extreme. So you needed a fair kind of balance here. And Becht could not help to level that out. Again, I can't play the projection game in trying to figure out, okay, what school would go for his services, because I genuinely do not know right now. But I suppose we'll find out. I suppose we will find out. And as I did say, I'll definitely, as things continue to go on, I'll do a better job of looking into recruiting classes overall, just to see what's going on, especially when you consider the transfer portal window is in January. Right, so I'll be looking into that as we continue to get there, and hell, we'll see where the moves are made, right? All I know is that, again, Virginia Tech, I told y'all, I've been hearing nothing but good things about their recruiting class and what they've been able to do with James Franklin there so far. We are actively just getting started. I told you niggas. One last thing. Just coming through just now, per Fox Sports, per other news outlets. Bobby Petrino is now moving over to the OC role full time, and he is going to join Bill Belichick's staff at UNC. First of all, we know he's a coward. I told y'all he was going to leave. Arkansas, y'all made the right decision getting Silverfield when you got him. The nigga upped and left. We already knew what time it was. From Arkansas, originally, for having an affair, to go over to North Carolina actively to deal with that mess? What the hell is wrong with you? For one, man, oh my gosh. And yes, Michael Lombardi is still the general manager. Why is he still the general manager? I don't know. Why? Why, for one? In all seriousness, let's get serious about this for a second. As an offensive coordinator, what could go wrong? Because the shit you saw from North Carolina on display with their offense, outside of, I think it was Ship, one of their wide receivers, if I'm not mistaken. Outside of him, everything else was an abject failure for this offense this season. And that could be a personnel thing, but scheme was definitely a massive part of it. Because, again, you actively thought, Lombardi, that it was a good idea last season to bring along Bill Belichick, and then somehow try to convince us that Freddie Kitchens was great as an offensive coordinator. Yes, maybe he could be a good one in college. We knew what kind of football terrorism this nigga was pulling off in Cleveland. Yes, he, with Baker Mayfield, had that little glory run for just a few games. The nigga was flat out garbage in the NFL. Let's get that very clear. You thought it was going to be an instant switch once he moved over to college? And look how that turned out for you. You were literally getting into close matches with Charlotte, of all teams, throughout the course of the season. Richmond, of all teams, throughout the season. They just could not do anything on that side of the football. And the defense also, the defense. Look, man, Petrino off that alone is an automatic upgrade. This comes down to, this is not something that can be fully evaluated immediately. Even though, again, we know what exactly Bobby Petrino does. Look, you gotta give this some time. North Carolina is probably going to be looking to just revamp their entire roster. I don't know if that'd be the solution for them, but they want to get better talent in there. They're gonna need better talent in there if they want to compete. And depending on who they get, well, then you're gonna have a situation where, okay, we can get Petrino over here with these guys. We can get Belichick over here with these guys, especially if his son is still the DC for some reason. We can get them here with these people to start engineering game plans and getting things in motion. So then we can start to get a feel for what scheme we're trying to run and everything like that. Because in reality, even though we have an understanding about what Bobby Petrino might have done with other schools, we don't know that right now. He just got hired. And while he might try to implement some certain qualities in this particular offense, it could look different depending on the skill positions that he has, depending on the personnel that he has to work with. So you gotta get that hashed out. That is my honest reaction to that. We'll see with time whether or not this works, and we'll see with time whether or not he sticks around for long enough to make a true impact with this team. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.